I am here in my backyard, and this is Diva Q, also known as Danielle Bennett. And today we're going to do a tutorial on how to make epic ribs on the grill. We want to welcome you to Girls Night In Online. This is a great platform, so make sure you check out all of their other content. So today we are going to be doing epic, delicious ribs in the backyard. This is my backyard, and this is where I work 24/7 typically right now. So I'm so thankful you guys are able to come and join me for ribs today. It's a special day. Today is really important to me because I'm not raising money for myself. This is all about Operation Barbecue Relief. So if you could please make a donation to Operation Barbecue Relief, I would really appreciate it. These people have served over 4 million meals out to those in need, and that warms my heart completely. So thank you all very much. Just to let you know, we have the chat line open, but you guys are muted. You can ask questions, just to let you know. And today we're here in the backyard, and we're going to be starting with a rack of what's called St. Louis cut ribs. So we've got a beautiful rack of St. Louis cut ribs, and the grill, as you can hear, is just finished heating up. We've been actually working on these ribs for the last 5 to 6 hours. The reason is that when it comes to doing ribs, we try to measure by temperature, not time. So these are cold out of the fridge. As you can see, a St. Louis cut rib is a nice rectangular cut of rib. It's got a membrane on the back. It typically has a flap that's usually attached to the diaphragm. So we're going to be doing a little bit of trim work. Basically, it's got lots of internal marbling, and it's a delicious, thick, heavy rack of ribs. So on average, about 3 to 4 pounds where possible. So we start with the rack of ribs actually meat side down. And this is really important. We like to start with it meat side down because we're actually going to start by working on the back of the ribs in order to get some things trimmed. So we've got the meat facing upwards with the bones. We've got this flat meat running all along the back edge. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a trim knife, and we're going to trim off that black flap meat. And the reason we do that is because if we leave it on the rib, what happens is that we're going to have barbecue rub trapped underneath this flap, and it's going to get really gritty, not that delicious, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to eat underneath. But this meat here is completely edible. So I actually like to keep all of this. I have a meat grinder. It's a 1/2 horsepower grinder. And I actually like to trim or keep all my trimmings and actually use it for grind. So I have a bag in my freezer for pork trimming, for beef trimming, and for chicken trimming. And so when I have a big enough quantity, I actually pull out my grinder and I grind up all my own meat. So we try to reduce as much waste as possible. So the other thing we were going to do for trimming on this side of the rack of ribs is that each end of the rack of ribs, we've got bones. And on this one, we've got a little shattered part of a bone. And on this side here, we've got some really flappy meat. So what we're going to do in order to actually have really big, moist pieces of meat, we're actually going to trim off a little bit off of each end so that we end on nice, soft meat. And the reason we do that is because at some point during the cooking process, we're actually going to be wrapping these all in foil. And that's to expedite the cooking process, to get a little more flavor in there, to make it even better. So on this end now that we've trimmed it off, we've actually got now a nice edge of nice, soft meat. We're going to do the same on this other end, a thicker piece, because this is a little thinner than the rest of the rack of ribs. So we're going to trim that off as well. Now, once again, we're not going to dispose of that. We're actually going to debone this at a later date, and we're going to include it with our trimmings so that we can grind it and not waste any of this meat. Trying to reduce waste is kind of a really important thing to me. Now, on the other side of the rack of ribs, we've got an end here that's really covered in a lot of very soft kind of flappy fat. And that fat actually is going to prevent our barbecue rub from getting into the protein surface. So what I like to do is I like to lay the rack of ribs down, going back to my sharp boning knife right now, and I'm going to actually just be taking a little light layer off. And the reason I'm doing that is, once again, to enable that protein to come to the surface so that we can actually get some delicious barbecue rub into the meat. Because right now, if you go to the grill and it's all covered in fat and you layer on barbecue rub, what happens is that fat and protein heat up at different times. Fat actually heats up faster than protein because fat has a lot more water molecules in it. Because it's got a higher water concentration, it starts to bubble. And when it bubbles, all your barbecue rub is actually going to come off the rack of ribs. So in order for us to get a better flavor profile overall, you actually want to layer barbecue rub into protein. So we're just gonna do a little bit of a trim. You may not be able to get all of that fat off there, but get a good chunk of it off there so that you can enable us to build up something called bark. For those of you who are not familiar with barbecue, bark is that delicious mahogany, crusty edge on the outside of all great, delicious barbecue meats. That's where so much of that wood-fired flavor comes in. And of course, all of that delicious texture as well. So it's a combination of sugars that are naturally occurring in the proteins. It's a combination of the barbecue rubs and the wood-fired flavor. That all combined together makes bark. And that literally is caramelization of the surface of the meats. That's what makes delicious barbecue. Now, we're gonna go back to the bone side. So one of the things is that we've got the bone side facing up. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab some paper towels. So I've got just some paper towels here, 2, just in case I need them. And this is my method on how to remove the membrane from the back of the ribs. You see, this papery membrane on the back of the ribs will allow smoke to get into the meat still. However, it does prevent a lot of the barbecue rub getting into the back of the meats. So I always try to recommend people take that membrane off, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. So here is my method on how to actually get that membrane off. You want to grab your rack of ribs in your hand and hang it. The reason is that when you hang it in your hands, the actual membrane gets very, very tight in between 2 bones. So you take your paper towel, you grab the membrane in between the 2 bones because it's nice and taut. When it's taut like that, it's really easy to grab with a paper towel. Once you get that paper towel worked underneath there, all you have to do is pull up. Now, once you get it started, this is where you can lay your rack of ribs back down, and then you move your paper towel from one section to the other, and then you gradually go, and then all you have to do is pull that membrane right off. As you can see, it's really tight, and it's really fibrous stuff, and it really could hang a truck. It's not tasty either, okay? So I want to remove that so I have great barbecue rub absorbed into my meats. Now, if there's a couple little pieces still on there, just go back in there with a little bit more paper towel. There's a little piece that was there, so we're taking that out. If you see any other pieces, all you have to do, take it out with either a paper towel or pulling it up. And if you can't get it all, it's just barbecue. Don't stress about it. If you're not doing a competition, it's really nothing to worry about. But seriously, try to get off as much as you can. So there you go. So we've got all the membrane off the back. Once again, to review how to remove membrane, you grab your rack of ribs. You actually go like this and hang it in between 2 parts of the bone. You take the paper towel, you grasp the membrane, and you pull upwards. And then we have a completely clean rack of ribs, and we're ready to go on to the next stage of building terrific ribs. So the grill behind me today is a Traeger Timberline 1300. It's a 100% wood pellet grill. It's got an angle drip shield in there. It's got an auger motor that delivers pellets to the hot pot, and it gives us a completely indirect cooking area. This is really important to note for the recipes that I write, that they're all composed for a Traeger grill. Because of that indirect heat shield, you actually end up with a really lovely indirect heat that's more like convection style cooking. We get wood-fired flavor from 100% hardwood pellets. And at the end of the day, we also don't get anything burnt because it's indirect. You're welcome. Thanks for asking questions, guys, by the way. I appreciate that. I'm just seeing a couple of them pop up now, and people are answering for me, which is great. So we're going on a Traeger grill today, and to make it really easy for ourselves, you can use a lot of stuff as binders when it comes to making ribs. I see a lot of recipes, and I've written a couple myself using mustard. You have some that are written oil. You have a variety of things you can use to actually bind the barbecue rub to the ribs themselves. For me, I like juices. So that's pineapple juice or apple juice. I also love using sodas. So ginger ale, ginger beer, Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, any of those types of products, because they're adding a little bit of sugar to the surface. And that little bit of sugar on the surface actually helps build bark. So I have a big bottle of apple juice here. And you can use peach nectar, you can use apple juice. Like I said, you can use whatever you want. And you want to generously spritz the back of your ribs. Now, I always start, it's a competition thing, I always start with the meat side down or the presentation side down first and the bones facing upwards. So since the bones are upwards, I've got the bones all nicely saturated now, and I'm using Traeger's pork and poultry rub. There's lots of recipes in my cookbook, by the way, for rubs you can make from scratch, or maybe you have your favorite rub at home. This is one of my favorite for pork, and we're gonna generously season the bone side of these ribs. And that generous, rubbing of ribs will actually give us a lot of flavor. That's why we took the membrane off, to get all that delicious wood-fired flavor, and of course the rub in there. And here's a tip: you eat all sides, so make sure you season all sides of your ribs. So we're going to season them all, making sure to get all the edges, give them a little pat down. And you can see when I lift it up on the cutting board, it really does a great job of absorbing the rub right into this rack of ribs. Now you want to flip it over, and now you want to season it again. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to spritz it with a little bit of apple juice, get it all saturated, and then we're going to generously sprinkle it with our pork and poultry rub from Traeger. Once again, I got to thank my sponsors and partners, Traeger Grills, Duluth, and of course Yeti. They're always good to me. Victorinox is the one who makes most of my knives. They've always been generously in supporting all the fundraising events I've done, so I want to thank them generously for doing that. So we've got the surface all completely coated. I'm going to give it a little spritz again, right before it goes to the grill. And it goes to the grill bone side down, just to let you know, okay? So we've got our ribs. They are completely saturated. They are bone side down, and this is how they go on the grill. But here's a tip. When you go to the grill, and you put your ribs on. When you go to the grill, give your ribs a little squish up. When you give them a little squish up, the actual thickness will be a lot better. Operation Barbecue Relief is a great organization, and I'm really proud to support them. This is actually a 6-inch Fibrox semi-flex boning knife from Victorinox. It's available on Amazon. I have about 12 of these. I've been using them for years. Thanks for the question. So here we go, guys. We've got this rack of ribs, and we're going to go to the grill. So we put it on the grill, and every half hour to every 45 minutes, you want to come back and you want to spritz those ribs. Now, the temperature my grill is going at today is 250 degrees. Anywhere between 225 and 250 is really great for a rack of ribs. So when your ribs get to an internal temperature of between 160 and 170 degrees, it's time actually to wrap your ribs. So how do you know and where to temp? Here's how we do it. I'm going to grab a clean cutting board so we have no cross-contamination, a clean pair of gloves, and I'm going to grab a rack right off the grill. So when it comes to doing ribs, I try not to measure by time. I really do prefer temperature. So this is a digital thermometer from my friends over at ThermoWorks. It's called an MK4. And the reason I like it is it's because it's like a 2-second read. And I've never found anything more consistent and faster than that. So we've got a clean pair of gloves. We've got a clean cutting board. And we're going to grab a rack of ribs. So I happen to have a rack of ribs here that's sitting right around 160 to 170 degrees. So you can see the color is quite lovely. It's a deep, rich red mahogany. I don't need to flip the ribs on a Traeger grill, Scott. Thanks for asking that question. Typically on a Traeger, because of how the convection air goes all the way around, the actual smoke travels in a figure-8 configuration, and so you actually don't need to flip the ribs at all. However, when I do wrap them, I'm going to show you that step next. So our ribs are a little floppy, so they're not done yet though. And how you want to measure is you go in between two bones, right in the middle, right in between two bones. You want to take the temperature, and that temperature should be between 160 and 170 degrees. Once again, we put them on the grill, bone side down. We spritz them every half hour to 45 minutes with a little bit of apple juice or peach nectar or whatever juice you guys like, or Dr. Pepper or ginger ale or Coca-Cola. Any of those work just fine. And then we continue to grill them until they get to 160 to 170 degrees. Now, when they're at this stage, it's time to wrap your ribs. And the reason we wrap ribs is actually to expedite the cooking process, to get some more flavors in there, and to make them shiny and delicious and succulent and even better. So here's how we wrap ribs. So I've got our rack of ribs, like I said, between 160. No, I don't have super smoke on because it's running at 250 degrees, but thank you for your question. If you want to use smoker super smoke, you can always run it at 225 degrees if you want to smoke your flavor on your Traeger, okay? So we've got a rack of ribs. I've got a piece of foil here, so we're going to pull the foil over. Now your foil should be approximately 4 inches longer on each end than your rack of ribs. Now, what can you put in your foil? I'm running hickory today, hickory wood. But remember, it's your house. If you have a different flavor of wood that you like, whether it be hickory or pecan or mesquite or oak or cherry or maple, it's your house. It's your flavor profile. I love hickory the most, so that's what I'm using today. Remember, there is not one right way to make barbecue. There are a million ways, but there's some really good, neat science-based tips to help you execute the best ribs ever. And I think measuring by temperature versus time is definitely one of them. So we've got a piece of foil here. It's a little bit about 4 inches longer on each end than the length of your ribs. Now in your foil, you can put a ton of stuff, okay? So today I've chosen a few things. I've got a little bit of butter. I've got some brown sugar. I've got some honey, and I've got some peach nectar. So these are the 4 ingredients I'm using in my ribs. Now at your house, maybe you like spicy things. I would include hot sauce. Maybe you've got a chili powder you really like. Maybe there is a homemade recipe for a jam or a jelly that you really like the flavor for. Those also work great in foil wraps. Additionally, if you wanted to just go with a plain rib, go with a plain rib. I think the juice really helps definitely moisturize some of the ribs that are out there. Additionally, it kind of makes a bit of a glaze in the package. So this is how I do it. So I start off with my foil, and then I put on, there's 3/4 of a cup, and you guys, there is a recipe posting. I put about half of my barbecue, my brown sugar on the bottom of the foil, okay? And then what I do is I take my ribs, and Scott, you were asking me if I flip the ribs. This is actually when I flip the ribs. I actually put the ribs in meat side down. Oh, thanks very much, Karen. That's very kind of you. So one of the things is that we've got a meat section here and we've got a bone section. So when it comes to doing a foil package, we want to put this in the package like meat side down, okay? So this is when I actually change the direction of the ribs. So now that they're in there with the meat side down, I'm gonna layer up some other ingredients on the top side here because it's gonna eventually drizzle over. So I've got the rest of the brown sugar. So that was 3/4 cup divided basically. And we're gonna just press it all from one end to the other. Because remember, once again, we eat all sides, so you might as well season all sides. Once we have the brown sugar in there, I want you to take some honey and do a little drizzle, just like that. Now, I love honey in the packages. Now, if you don't have honey at home, you can use corn syrup. If you don't have corn syrup at home, you can use molasses. It's a little darker though. But here's another thing you can use, pancake syrup. That little bit of stickiness and that little bit of shine makes a big difference to ribs. So there's some alternatives for you guys to use at home in your own homes and with whatever resources you have. So we've got brown sugar in there. We've got honey. We're going to add in a little bit of butter. And the reason I like the butter, it makes for a really lovely textured rib. If you don't want to use butter, just skip it. You can also use parquet. A lot of times in competition, we would use parquet. It's a nice stable fat and it doesn't split the milk solids, which is always nice. Now, once you've got all this point up and done, I'm going to take my gloves off because they're getting all sticky. It's time to actually fold up the foil. Now we're going to add the juice, but I'm going to show you a trick I do. I typically have to do, I don't know, a lot more than just one rack of ribs. So I'm a little OCD about how I wrap my ribs because I like them nice and neat. Remember, we are going to cook by temperature, not by time. So in order to cook by temperature, not by time, we actually need to be able to get back into this rib package. A key component of this, people keep scrunching their foil. And if you scrunch your foil, you can't open this package up without ripping the foil. So when you wrap your ribs, take your time to do it properly and neatly. So pull one side up, pull the other side up. And then what you want to do is you want to fold this over. Now this is fairly thick foil. So another tip would be always to invest in a really good quality thick foil so you don't have to put in multiple layers. Now I'm just folding that over a couple of times, nice and neat like that, pressing it all down nice and flat towards the meat. Now at this end here, I'm going to make a couple of nice neat folds over just like that. And then at this end, the opposite end, I'm actually going to take my hand and I'm going to make a bit of a funnel. You see, like I said, I typically have to do multiples of racks of ribs. So as you can see, I've got a funnel at this end. I've got a nice fold at this end. And now that I have a funnel, and if I'm doing multiples of racks of ribs, I usually just line them all up. Here's the thing. You want to eyeball up about half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of whatever liquid you're using. You can also use bourbon, by the way. I'm kind of a fan of that, but don't use the top shelf stuff. You can also use beer. So you want to eyeball up about 3/4 of a cup. So basically you don't want your ribs floating, but you do want them completely saturated, okay? And then we're gonna do another nice fold, okay? Now the key is, once again, because we've got those nice folds, we can actually get this package open and closed multiples of times so that we can check the temperature. Remember, we want to check the temperature between two of those center bones. So if we were to squish all this stuff, we wouldn't be able to open it up. So this now goes to the grill just as it is. It is meat side down in the package. And one of the things is we're going to put this back on the grill. Right? Fix the phone. All right.
Danielle.
So yeah, one sec. Fix your phone, please. One sec.
There you are.
Are you back? Sorry, guys. Leave it. Thanks, honey. Sorry about that, guys. We had a technical difficulty. So we've now put the ribs back in the grill, and they have gone in the grill just as they were wrapped, meat side down. So now that they've been on the grill, we're going to return them back to the grill at the 275 degrees. So we're going up in temperature just a little bit, okay? You can grill your ribs 225 to 250 degrees, but now that they're protected and all nicely wrapped, we can actually put the temperature up to 275 degrees. And that makes your entire cooking process a little quicker because of that. So we're gonna get rid of that cutting board. And now, through the power of me getting these done early, I want you to pretend about an hour has gone by. Just pretend magically that an hour has gone by. We're gonna grab a nice clean cutting board. Again, I don't like any cross-contamination potentials. So this is a big deal for me. I don't like anything taking the chance of getting onto my ribs or any of my meats. We're gonna grab another pair of clean gloves, but this time, since I'm grabbing a very hot rack of ribs, okay, in foil, I'm gonna grab some work gloves. So these are from my friends at Duluth. This is just an everyday average work glove that they have. I like it because they're just enough protection for me in order to not get my hands burnt. They're not for dealing with any wet work, but it's plenty for my hands to cover and take care of them so they don't get burnt. So I'm gonna grab a rack of ribs that has already been wrapped for quite a while. So here we go. As you can see, just dripping out a little bit as I'm bringing them over. So now that we have this rack of ribs sitting here, you can see that these were wrapped the same way as all the other ones were. So we're gonna turn the rack of ribs so you guys can see it. And as you can see, because we wrapped so carefully, it was really, really, really easy to open that package up just like that. And now you can see inside this package, we've got some beautiful juices going on, and it's all sorts of deliciousness. So here's the thing. The first temperature I'm looking for if I want to sauce my ribs is about 192 to 195 degrees. So you want to take your digital thermometer and you want to once again go in between those two bones, 192 to 195 degrees. Now the ribs aren't done yet. Here's why. We actually don't want to take our ribs completely finished. Because I want to put sauce on these ribs, I actually want to allocate myself a little bit of time in order to sauce my ribs. So I always like to give myself the 10 degrees. So ribs traditionally are done for me anywhere from 204 to 206 degrees, somewhere in there. So we've got this rack of ribs. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna carefully flip it over. And now you can see we've got a beautiful red mahogany rack of ribs that just is begging for a little bit of sauce. And we just wanna finish these ribs up. Now, you can, at your house, take these ribs right out of this package, slather some sauce on, throw them on the grill. All that sauce is gonna drip all over your grill and it's gonna make a mess. Or you can work smarter. So let me introduce you to the barbecue boat. You had all this lovely big piece of foil, so you may as well just fold over some sides and build yourself a barbecue boat. This just makes sense. Many of us have been doing this for competitions for years because it keeps everything nice and contained and nice and clean. And that's always a good thing for me. So we've got our barbecue boat getting built. As you can see, lots of goodness, lots of red mahogany color in those ribs. Lots of wood-fired goodness from that hickory wood. And because we were spritzing so regularly before we actually wrapped our ribs, we've got lots of wood-fired flavor in there too, because smoke is actually water soluble. So it adds a lot of flavor. So we've got our ribs now in this barbecue boat, and all you have to do, grab a bottle of your favorite sauce. Drizzle a little bit on there. And you got a brush, or you can use your hand if it's gloved. I use my hand all the time, by the way, all the time. And I go around all my edges, because once again, you eat all edges, so you might as well season all edges. And now this whole boat, as you guys can see, goes back on the grill. Now, once again, because I did this ahead of time, we've got a rack of ribs here that are completely cooked, 100%. So one of the things is that we've got this rack of ribs, we've got it completely cooked, and now we want to cut our ribs. So one of the things that I like to teach people is how to cut ribs, because you think it would be obvious, but a lot of people try to cut it like meat side downwards. So here's our cutting board. We had some hot stuff on it. So what I like to do is give out this tip. You take your cutting board, spritz a little bit of apple juice or, you know, peach nectar or whatever juice you're dealing with onto the cutting board. And then, because we actually set the sauce, take a look at these beautiful ribs. It's a beautiful mahogany rack of ribs. The sauce is all set. Now, because we spritzed it with a little bit of apple juice, not a ton of the sauce and everything is going to stick to the cutting board. So then you want to place them on the cutting board, and it makes it so much easier to cut when you can actually see where the bones are. So I've got a basic chef's knife here. And what you want to do is you want to hold the bones. You want to do some nice cuts right in between the bones. And what you want to do is you just want to take that big, beautiful, succulent rib and take a gorgeous bite. And one of the things I love is that I think this is a great consistent recipe for whatever flavor profile you guys work with. As you can see, not a lot sticks to the cutting board because of the apple juice that's on the cutting board. We've got a beautiful, succulent, moist rack of ribs. You can make it with whatever flavor profile you want. And that is how I make ribs at home, everybody. Beautiful, delicious. Oh, and by the way, if you're on the gram or if you're on Twitter and you got to do that posted picture, let me give you another tip. Before you take the picture, always spritz them with another layer of juice. They look a lot shinier then. So there you go, guys. We've got a couple of minutes for delicious questions. Here is a beautiful rib, consistently done every single time. So consistent, repeatable results, guys. That's what I try to teach at every one of my classes. And today for half an hour to raise money for Operation Barbecue Relief and all the goodness that they do all over the country feeding people barbecue. So this is a lot of fun to be here teaching you guys. 130, 140 of you signed up. I hope you guys had a good time. I hope you enjoyed this. I really hope that you tune in for other Girls Night In online classes. I think it's really, really important. This is actually a Victorinox chef's knife as well. I actually love using the Victorinox 6-inch Fibrox knife. And that's my boning and trimming knife for everything. This is a great, consistent, repeatable results recipe and method that I have been using for years. You're welcome, everybody. I see all the comments. They're flashing up pretty fast there. I missed one of them. Great presentation. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Patty. I appreciate that. Thank you all very, very much. Once again, we're going to run through it from start to finish, guys, just quickly so I can go over all the steps. You start with your ribs cold from the fridge. We trim the back flap if it has it on there. I love using a St. Louis cut rib because it's nice and consistent from side to side. You want to pull your membrane off the back side of the ribs. You want to trim off the end bones so that it goes to nice, soft, consistent meat on either side. You want to spritz your ribs with a little bit of juice. And then another thing is, you absolutely want to season up both sides of your ribs, and you go to the grill, and every 20 to 45 minutes, you want to make sure that you spritz those ribs on the grill with a juice of some type, okay? 225, 250, anywhere in there is where I like to run my ribs. At 160 degrees, you want to wrap your ribs somewhere between 160 and 170. And that's when all that beautiful bark has developed on the outside. You want to finish your ribs at 204 to 206 degrees. And if you want sauced ribs, pull them off at 192 to 194 degrees in there. Build a barbecue boat and then slather your ribs with sauce so that everything stays nice and clean. I'm going to grab my phone. So I missed one more question. Let me see. See, guys, it's been in the stand the whole time. So there you go. All right. So here we go. Somebody asked, when you hit 193, you don't wrap up again, right? No, I actually do the barbecue boat. There we go. So that's it, guys. That is Ribs 101 for me. I hope you enjoy this. You guys can be unmuted now. We're going to say goodbye. When I do my ribs on a cutting board, those are from the Barbecue Superstore and Smoky Mountain Smokers. I think that that's a really great place to shop, and also both of those companies I actually support. And when you do flip your ribs, if you were using an outside grill, no, I still don't ever flip my ribs. I use Traegers and you don't need to. So I just want to say goodbye to everybody.